everyone, and in today's video we will be covering the topic State and Non-State Initiatives Addressing Caste and Tribe Discrimination from Chapter 5 Patterns of Social Inequality and Exclusion, Class 12 Sociology. So, the Indian state, which means the government of India, its policies and administrative machinery, has had special programs. Specific policies, schemes, and initiatives which were designed to address the unique challenges faced by certain groups, scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. So scheduled castes basically these are the groups which were formerly known as untouchables or Dalits, and they were subjected to extreme forms of exclusion, humiliation, and discrimination. Scheduled tribes are the indigenous tribal communities which are often living in remote areas who have historically faced marginalization, land dispossession, exploitation, distinct from caste discrimination, but is still significant. And this is a very crucial historic detail which tells us that the awareness of the need for special measures for these groups existed even before India gained independence, which suggests a long history of disadvantage that predates modern India. The historical context is the British colonial government. The British colonial government also had some welfare measures and classifications. The schedules listing the caste and tribes recognized as deserving of special treatment. So schedules means that there were some official lists or appendix, and these lists, they were identified for some specific caste and tribes. They were deserving special treatment. Means government formally acknowledged that yes, you need support because of the historical injustice that you faced. Massive discrimination practiced against them. The scale of discrimination was very massive, widespread, and severe prejudice which they faced. In 1935 by British Indian government, which provides the specific origin point for these official lists. It highlights that the formal classification and acknowledgement of these groups' disadvantaged status began under the colonial rule. Now, there is the Government of India Act of 1935, which you might be aware. It was a significant constitutional reform by the British, and it included provisions for the categorization of these communities. After the independence, there was the continuity in the policies, that is, the newly independent Indian government understood the deep-seated nature of the problem and decided to maintain the existing framework for SCs and STs. Here, there is a concept of affirmative action, which we discussed in class 11 as well, just to remind you of, or something called as positive discrimination, which is designed to redress past injustice. And then yes, definitely Indian state is not maintained but also built upon the existing framework. Among the most significant additions is to the other backward classes. So there was a major development in the India's affirmative action policies. OBCs are socially and educationally disadvantaged classes who are not SCs or STs. They generally fall in between the forward castes and the SCs, STs in the traditional hierarchy, often facing various forms of backwardness. And since 1990s, so there was the implementation of Mandal Commission. So the implementations of the Mandal Commission recommendations in the early 1990s, which provided the reservations for OBCs. It was a landmark movement in Indian politics and social policy. The most important initiative attempting to compensate for past and present caste discrimination is known as reservations. So reservations, which is also known as quotas or affirmative action, which involves setting aside a percentage of seats or population for certain groups, right? So here, setting aside of some places or seats for the members of scheduled caste and tribes in spheres of public life, which is that it is not just limited to one area, but it applies to various aspects of public interaction and opportunity. Now, these include reservations in the state and central legislatures. These lists or the specific areas where reservations are implemented. Okay, state assemblies are basically the law-making bodies at the state level. Then you have Lok Sabha, the lower house of the Indian Parliament, Rajya Sabha, the upper house of the Indian Parliament. So, the employment opportunities like the government service, okay, jobs in ministries or the departments, public sector companies or the state-owned enterprises, there was a huge area of reservations there. And then the proportion of reserved seats is equal to the percentage share in the total population. Means this was given to ensure that the representation in institutions is roughly proportional to the share in the overall population, which would ensure fair representation and prevent underrepresentation. But for the OBCs, it was decided differently. OBCs, the quota was 27% was determined based on the recommendations of the Mandal Commission and other factors rather than strict population proportionality. The same principle is extended to other developmental programs of the government as well. Then some of which are exclusively for the scheduled caste, that means only for that group, which gave them preference or the favorable treatment. In addition to reservations, so before moving on here, whatever we have studied here is that the concept of reservations, which started even before independence for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, which was based on the list which was created by British in 1935. It was continued, it was expanded after independence, more significantly to include the OBC in the early 1990s. It involved setting aside seats in legislature, government jobs, educational institutions. For SCs and STs, the proportion is tied to the population share, but OBCs is what it was determined differently. Apart from just seats, it also applies to the government developmental programs exclusively for SCs or STs, which is giving them preference. Next, we move on to this paragraph, wherein apart from reservations, there were a number of laws which was passed to prohibit, means to forbid, punish the caste discrimination, especially untouchability. And one of the laws was Caste Disabilities Removal Act of 1850. Okay, 1850 Act was a significant reform which was challenging the idea that a change in religion would lead to forfeiture of property or other rights, which was a common practice earlier, that disinherited converts. And this disallowed the curtailment of rights of citizens. So basically, here, traditionally, if someone changed their religion or was deemed outcast, they could lose their inheritance, social standing, and other rights. This law aimed to prevent such automatic loss of rights based on these factors. Then there's this Constitution Amendment 93rd Act of 2005. This provides a contemporary example of a law addressing caste-related issues, showing the ongoing legislative efforts. And it's the most recent one, 23rd January 2006. Coincidentally, 1850 and 2006 related to education. Yep. The 93rd Amendment was for introducing the reservation for OBC in the institution of higher education as well. In the 1850 Act, it allowed entry of Dalits to government schools. In between, there have been numerous laws, of which the important ones are, of course, the Constitution of India itself. So before moving here, there were a range of laws which were aimed at ending, prohibiting, and punishing caste discrimination, especially untouchability. The historical significance of the Caste Disabilities Removal Act 1850, the 93rd Constitutional Amendment in 2005, and in 2005 as well as in 2006. In 1850, they were related to education somehow, and Constitution of India also is the most crucial foundational document which in this legal battle standing against caste discrimination. There was also the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act in 1989. The Constitution also abolished untouchability through Article 17 and introduced the reservations provisions as we have mentioned above. This 1989 Prevention of Atrocities Act was revised and was strengthened. It strengthened the legal provisions for punishing acts and the violence or humiliation, and the legislation was passed repeatedly on this subject as proof of the fact that law alone cannot end a social practice. Again, we need the mass campaigns and social support in this. State action cannot ensure social change. No social group, however weak or oppressed, is only a victim. Human beings are capable of organizing and acting on their own. Okay? Dalits also, they have formed the political, educational, cultural fronts, and then they were able to break their discrimination somehow. Like political organization, they formed the Hujan Samaj Party, Dalit Sangharsh Samiti of Karnataka, Dalit Political Assertion. So these are some of the significant contributions to literature in several Indian languages as well. You can find it out. This was all for this video, where we have studied the state initiatives like these acts, what was how it was the starting, and the non-state initiatives, which is addressing the caste as well. Start means SC, tribe, which means ST discrimination. In the next video, we will be covering the other backward classes. This was all for this video. Thank you.